I am back for the 5th writing session on the piece for string quartet called Adaptation. And last time we were here, we looked at form. We opened up that form, we added some measures to make the form stronger, and we got up to about 3 minutes and 45 seconds of the piece completed. We want eventually for this piece to be 6 minutes long, and the form is really starting to take shape, and I've decided what I want to do to finish off the piece. We're going to need to add about 70 measures at our tempo of 132. So let's look at the first spot that I want to change. Here on page 14, we're just finishing up our cello solo. That was playing over the alternating whole tone chords that we talked about before, and we're moving into this transitional piece. I'd like to add some measures here, right at measure 91, so I'm going to add in about 24 bars here, so let's just go ahead and do that. That'll give me some room to work. With that, I'll still need to add about 50 more measures, so let's look at a few more spots I've targeted to complete this form. On page 18, here in measure 136, we're just about to hit that section where we explored suspensions. And to me, this seems like it's the section that is building to an ending. So I'd like to add, well, let's say again, 24 bars here to prepare that ending, to prepare those suspensions. And with that, I know we're still going to need about 20 more bars to complete the piece. They're going to go into the ending section in some way. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work yet, but I feel really good about the form that I've created here, and it feels like I've got a solid plan to continue. So I'm going to go ahead and write, and we'll come back and take a look. I'm back with the newly composed sections that we talked about. The first one starts in measure 91 and goes on to measure 118. Let's just have a listen. I'm going to start back in this featured cello section back at measure 87 and listen how that transitions into 91 and then how it comes out of measure 118 back to what we've already composed. You may have noticed that the viola took the lead in this section after we have just come out of the cello taking the lead. And I think it's really important for every player in the string quartet to have their moment in the sun, especially in this piece where we're talking about how there are multiple ways to evolve, multiple paths to take, and they all have their say. The great thing about a string quartet is, yes, they can play in a homogeneous way and all blend, but they also are unique individual voices. And here we heard that with the viola. Let's look at some of the things that I did to take advantage of the viola's unique voice in this piece. The first two measures of our newly composed material, starting here in 91, are transitional. They're getting us from this cello, which was in the lead, to now our viola taking the lead. We're using many of the same rhythms here that we've used throughout the piece, but we're rearranging them slightly to give it its own fresh take on how this melody should be adapted. Melodically, we're continuing to use notes from the whole tone scale, but as you can see here, at the end of the measure, we deviate from that with this F flat and G flat. Normally, this section from here would go like this. But instead, with the G flat and F flat, it goes like this. So once again, this small change just goes to the viola's unique adaptation of this melody. You'll also see I'm supporting our viola with chords not from the whole tone scale as we did with the cello melody that was just playing, but instead here we're using our major 7 flat 5 chords. Here we have an A major 7 flat 5, a B major 7 flat 5, an E major 7 flat 5. You also see that the harmonic rhythm is changed where I'm only sporadically putting in the chords just to give that viola a lot of room to be heard. On pages 15 and 16, we continue on with our viola playing mostly in the whole tone scale, but deviating slightly here and there. In measures 100 and 101, we go back to our major 7 flat 5 chords, as we do again here in measures 107 through 108. We're also setting up a 3/4 time, which I continue on here in the cello, which is playing in groups of 3 as if it's still in 3/4, even though we've returned to 4/4 playing in the viola melody. This is something I introduced for a very short time earlier in the piece, and I just wanted to bring that back for a moment. Let's take a listen to those groups of 3 against the 4/4 and just see how that feels. On page 17, we continue on with our viola melody, and we start with this whole step trill. Now that's something we haven't heard in the rest of the piece, and I really like it for the viola here because again, it's its unique way of seeing this melody and expressing itself. I also like the chords in these two measures. They're slightly different than what we've heard before. Then we continue on in measure 114 with an exact quote of the end of the cello melody for these 4 bars. Harmonically, we're using the same chords, but we're shortening them again so that the viola will stick through, and it'll be slightly different than it was before. Then we return to the material we had already composed. Let's hear all of that together now that we've gone over all the particulars of it and see how that sounds. I'll start 4 bars back in measure 87 at the end of the cello section, just to give us some perspective on the new material going into measure 91. I think that's a really nice addition to the piece, especially allowing the viola some room to state its unique perspective on this melody. Let's move on to the next section that I targeted. The last thing I want to look at is here on page 21 in measure 139. And if you look at all of the notes in these two measures, you can see that they come from this cell right here. And we've heard this cell before. What I've done is broken them up into shorter pieces and then sustained the last note of each one of those pieces. So the violin 2 starts with the first piece, and then the first violin continues on with the phrase, and then the viola and the cello finish the phrase. If we play this all together, we'll hear that cell melody, and at the end, a chord will be formed. So let's just play all of that. Now, one of the things I didn't realize when I wrote this version of the cell way back, I think on page 4, was that the downbeats, when sustained, of this chord outline a major 7 flat 5 chord. It's been hidden in there all along, and I think that's why I've been so drawn to that chord in this piece. So I'm going to explore breaking this cell up and using this. In jazz, a lot of times we'll play this major 7 flat 5 chord over other root notes to get different kinds of sounds and different tensions on other chords. So I think that's something I'm going to explore as I move on in this section. I haven't completed it yet. I've just started playing around with it. So next time we'll come back and take a look at that, and we'll hopefully finish off this piece. I hope all these things that we've been going over are helping you in your composition process. Maybe these ideas you can use in some way. And I really thank everybody who's following along, and I hope to see you all next time.